now.
Oh, I was.
And if you want to mute yourselves, since we will be doing the prayer shortly. So good evening and welcome everybody back to We Have a Dream, a world without racism. Tonight, we will cover the results of previous discussions, review the proposal for our support, talk about next steps, and perhaps have time for the acknowledgement letter. But first, as always, we want to call on spiritual guidance. So, Father, would you please open with a prayer?
Sure. And let us all pray. Holy One, time and time again, you have made a choice to do what might touch the human heart, so a different course might be charted, where justice is more than words, where justice takes form and shape in the lives of your people. We, being your people, have been moving toward decisions that mirror your justice. We ask your assistance that in our dialogue and debates, we will keep our vision clear and choose rightly for the sake of your people, for your sake. This we seek from you through Jesus, your divine child, and in the unifying power of the Holy Spirit, to which we all say,
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Father. And also thank you for your continued support and presence in our journey here. And we also thank all of you for your participation in this effort of our dream of a world without racism. The last meeting, we took the pulse of where people's hearts led them as we polled the group on what organization they would like us to support as a community. And over the months, we explored interest in supporting a neighborhood, supporting education in disadvantaged schools, promoting what we already do in the parish with an anti-racism lens, building relationships with those in other cultures, and especially interest in what would cause structural systemic change. So considering practical concerns like our aging parishioners who are already active in many efforts, we also looked for organizations in place that might match our interests. So ultimately, we proposed 4 organizations to determine which our groups want to present to the parish. So to review, we voted on the following. We voted on the Baltimore Regional Initiative, Developing Genuine Equality, or BRIDGE, as most of us know it by, which is an interfaith group that works to make systemic structural change through legislation and offers opportunity to work with other cultures to build relationships. City Springs, our second one, is a public elementary middle charter school in a disadvantaged red line neighborhood, striving to sustain high academic achievement. And our parish already supports the school with tutoring and occasional aid. Then we had the South Baltimore Community Land Trust, which is a community-led land trust whose vision is to offer quality, affordable housing for those in Cherry Hill and Curtis Bay communities, free of environmental injustice. They work to build this vision by transforming vacant buildings from speculative commodities into community-owned assets, and also through transitioning from burning natural resources to a regenerative zero waste system. This aligns with our desire to affect a racially segregated red line neighborhood and its toxic environment. And they welcome thought leaders to bring change and build relationships. Then finally, St. Francis Academy is the oldest private African-American Catholic high school in Baltimore, founded in 1828, and one of the oldest in the nation. And it meets our group's education interests in a school receiving very little archdiocesan support considering its longevity and its special character. Now, the specific proposal is the support of the Kirk-Gaddy Fund to retain excellent teachers who otherwise would drift to schools with higher salaries. So we took the pulse of the group last month, polling with these 4 choices. We polled for first choice and then for second choice. And the results were, after the poll for first choice, the Community Land Trust was 55%, St. Francis Academy was 32%, and City Springs 14%. And then after weighting both choices, giving more weight for first choice, the final results were the Community Land Trust 47%, St. Francis 36%, and City Springs 17%. And we were a little concerned that the 2 education choices may have split the first choice, but if we added St. Francis and City Spring percentages together, it's still less than the Community Land Trust. So many people are already participating in anti-racist work, and supporting the Community Land Trust and St. Francis would not diminish those efforts. So we sent you a little more information on Monday of the top 2 choices with this when we sent out the Zoom link. So after a year of discussion and research, it was apparent that this group is passionate about supporting both a neighborhood and education. Audrey said that going forward, they would handle the Kirk-Gaddy Fund initiative, independent of the We Have a Dream group. So our proposal is to ask the parish council for a town meeting where we would share this working group's journey and find out if we will move forward as a parish or as this working group. We would conclude the meeting asking for parish support for South Baltimore Community Land Trust, our Racial Equity Fund, which we'll hopefully discuss a little later, and the acknowledgement letter to the Archbishop, at least to begin with. The letter is still in draft form, but we did incorporate all of your feedback, and we'll ask for approval as we get a little nearer to the town meeting. So we'd like to pause now for questions and conversations on what we have proposed. So if you want to use your yellow hand, or if you want to just raise your hand. And don't be shy.
I'm sorry, Peggy, would you repeat what
The
you're asking?
proposal or one of the.
No, what
Repeat,
you're
Rich.
asking us to raise our hand about, that's all.
Oh, I'm just saying we're opening it for discussions
okay.
or questions or any conversation about the proposal. So anything that I already talked about.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. All right, does that mean go for it, or does that mean, you tell me what that means? How many, go ahead, Father. Oh. You're
You're
muted.
muted, Father.
No, my phone was ringing.
Oh,
Oh.
okay.
No, I think the only thing is I didn't get a chance to read in detail about the neighborhood piece, the housing. I'm assuming they have a good track record in terms of purchase of land and buildings and successfully having people move into them. Is that accurate?
Sharon, where's Sharon?
Right over.
It's new, so it doesn't have, it hasn't had the years and years of existence. And in fact, it's, well, I'd say 2 to 3 years in formation. So we definitely have the charter, and we have properties that are in play. We have new properties that we just acquired to put in play. we've got, we have building plans, we have awards from everybody and anybody, including the city of Baltimore. So there's a lot there. And, but I can't say that it has, no, we have not put our first person in a house yet. We
Okay,
hope to begin a demolition on the first house this month.
We also mentioned, I think the last meeting, Father, that they also received the 35,000 from the Campaign for Human Development. The
Right, right, yeah.
okay. Thank you,
which,
Sharon.
which was a good indicator for us.
Yeah,
And plus, it's, as you mentioned, it's not only just for housing, it's for zero waste.
Zero waste,
Yeah.
which is
And
really
in
how
that-
it came to.
And in that area, they have been fighting for, well, not just the land trust, but the group, South Baltimore people, have been campaigning and successfully prevented an incinerator from being built, which would have been the largest, pretty much in the country. And they are negotiating with the city. When you see those new trash recycling cans, that's part of their negotiation with DPW and the mayor and everybody else, so that they can start to collect and differentiate between what goes to the landfill and what can be recovered for the betterment of the neighborhood and the city. So it's two things, it's the housing and it's the zero waste campaign.
And Sharon, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's how it came to my attention. Isn't that how it came to your attention too? First was through the zero waste.
Yes, I noticed it through the zero waste and also with the, when they, to go back farther, there's an initiative that was done 4 or 5 years ago for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Now you can pull that up on the Baltimore City website if you care to. The Affordable Housing Trust Fund was a people-based initiative to establish a fund specifically for the marginalized, redlined, everything we know in Baltimore. And this fund, which now has $30+ million in it, by the way, is specifically for struggling communities, people-oriented housing. And what the land trust want is they want permanently affordable housing. So when you're looking at a land trust property house, the idea is that that house will remain affordable to the people of the neighborhood in for 99 years or more. And that's different than just what we call traditional development. And it's for putting people in property, stabilizing neighborhoods. And if you're familiar with renovation projects as they have gone in the city and in other cities, what happens is the neighborhoods that are targeted, the people are most frequently, who have lived there and put up with everything, are most frequently displaced. And when the project is complete, there's very little or anything that they can afford that is in the area where they used to live. So the land trust, of which there are 3, South Baltimore's one, a great part of their principal founding is not displacement, renovation, affordable, and no displacement. Okay.
I was going to say that according to information provided online that you said, Peggy, the land trust has raised close to $3 million for the project, and they're like, what, $500,000 short. So there's still a need of funding, but they have made some progress.
We've made a lot of progress, and where make more they received, South Baltimore got a grant yesterday or day before. And and there's more and more things out there. It's just that, as you may be aware, the cost of doing anything COVID related, some of it is going up. Plus the fact that Curtis Bay and Cherry Hill sit quite near the Southport project, which is the Kevin Plank. And so the housing there is coming under siege from traditional realtors and developers. So we're time constrained and money constrained, both.
Matt Hill has been
I could
involved
just-
in this since the
yeah.
beginning also, Peggy.
Yeah,
Yes,
I
yes.
also, I also wanted to say, I'm sorry I wasn't at the last meeting and I haven't said anything about this. I did the site visit for CCHD for the funding of this, and it is really quite moving and inspiring. And I mean, it was my first experience with a land trust, and I just was really impressed. And my guess is that was the first funding from CCHD. And I think, you know, given the momentum, there's probably a good chance if they would apply again, they'd get perhaps larger funding down the road.
Thank you, Jerry, Dennis, and Sharon. Anybody else have any comments? Yeah, Jerry.
What is CCHD?
The Catholic Campaign for Human Development.
What is it?
The Catholic Campaign for Human Development.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, Rita. You're muted.
I have a question. I grew up in what I considered South Baltimore, and that's between downtown and the Hanover Street Bridge. Cherry Hill and Brooklyn and Curtis Bay are all south of that. I assume this only applies to those three neighborhoods, not to the area north of Hanover Street Bridge, because the area north of Hanover Street Bridge, the housing is quite expensive. Even houses that are over 100 years old easily go for $350,000 to $450,000. So I don't think there's any need to help the people on that side of the bridge.
No, this is not targeted for we're not able to look at that areas now, nor is there a need. We're talking about the areas that are south of Hanover Bridge and Cherry Hill for is a specific area that was developed for African Americans during and post World War II. It was designed specifically under the to confine them to that area is one way of saying it. It's a true. And there are other adjacent to that, you had areas where were very blue collar, just say that. And they have suffered from lack of investment from just about everybody for quite a while. You have a lot of you had the Bresco, the incinerator is in that area. You have a medical burner in that area. You have some serious other areas which are not what you would want to have, but they were put there because that was an area that didn't have anyone really to fight for it.
Thank you.
Sharon, I'm glad you brought that point out because Cherry Hill truly has been intentionally separated and segregated community, as you said. And even within the Black community, it had a sort of almost distinct identity because it was so separated from the rest of other Black communities proper. And with the development of the Under Armour complex all around it and the marina, you could easily see how if it were simply developed without the kinds of aids we're talking about, people would be displaced right and left. And you have the same property values going up there and squeezing people out that that you were talking about, Rita, in South Baltimore around the market and all. If you stand at points in Cherry Hill and then look down at the harbor and the marina, you could just see it happening without some sort of intervention and action.
That might have been one of the neighborhoods when we did the session on the intentional segregation. I think we talked about that area also, unless it was just you and I talking about it, Skip, but it's been on our radar.
Mm.
Anybody else? Gosh, we expected a lot of discussion.
It's Christmas.
It's is everyone just tired or? All right, well, go ahead.
I just have a
How-
thought. I'm not sure I can even articulate it well enough at the moment, but in talking about developing neighborhoods that have been traditionally segregated, what's to keep those areas from continuing to be segregated? I mean, I see this happening in St. Petersburg too. They're trying to come up with areas that, traditionally were redlined, and now they want to get in and make areas more affordable. But, I don't know, there's a tension there of, you want to have, places that are hospitable and people feel welcomed and they want to live there and they want to thrive and they want to have, areas that they feel comfortable in, but at the same time, they're still segregated. They're still, going to be, you walk across, town and when you're moving from, a white area into a Black area or into a, an area where there's, different ethnic groups. And I don't know, I guess there's no answer to that question at all, but and I really believe that there's a very strong need to, pull everybody up so that there's equity in places where they live. But how are we going to, make our communities, I don't know, places where there's no tension, there's a welcoming of everybody there. And so, if I move to Baltimore and if I want to move into Curtis Bay, is that going to be seen as, well, I'm infringing on, a Black person's ability to live there because I'm taking their place? Am I making any sense with that?
Mm-hmm. I don't think I could really answer that, as you said. And what I have noticed, however, is that over the years, segregated communities, which were often at odds with one another, for instance, look at Essex, places like that. What I've noticed is that the working class people who once were in conflict with one another are integrating and mingling maybe more than I would see in better established neighborhoods. So I'm amazed as if I go to places like Essex or Dundalk at the admixture of people of similar economic status. And I would just figure that, sort of if you build it well enough, people will come. I've never really sensed that there was a sense of wanting to be isolated on the part of the Black community as a whole. The isolation has come from the other direction. So I think that do it well enough and give it time and don't push people out who were there. I think it would naturally happen.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
That's me thinking. Okay.
Yeah.
From your lips to God's ears. Danny, I think you were next.
How is Planck's project impacting these three areas or potentially impacting these three areas? Does anyone know?
Yeah, I do.
Sharon does.
What it's doing is it is causing the housing prices to escalate in anticipation.
Mhm.
The Planck project, if you've driven down there or looked down there, is still in its infancy. COVID has a lot to do with that because it has delayed. It would if it weren't for COVID, it'd probably be much farther along than it is. But in any case, anyone with a map, and that's just about everybody who's interested in property, has been looking and saying, well, this is what this is going to be. And of course, there are lovely pictures of what that group is planning to, the
Mhm.
fullness of the project. So what it's
Mhm.
doing to the Cherry Hill, South Baltimore area is it's causing people to come in and do what can be very detrimental to people who are marginalized. Is people are coming in and buying up properties and then letting them sit.
Mm.
And that is at the last public housing, public auction, another person from South Baltimore was there, another two people were there, trying to acquire property. And they found that they could not, they were being priced out on things that were going for, once upon a time down there, you could buy a piece of property for as little as $1,000.
Mm.
If you pushed it, you went to $3,000 or $5,000. Nowadays, it's $10,000, $15,000. And these are not properties that you can move in. That's just to acquisition. You're still gonna spend thousands more to make it livable. So
Mhm.
what it's doing, Kevin Planck's project is causing the gentrification levels and interest to rise. Now, the other thing that was mentioned about people, there are, I agree with if you build it, they will come. People are going to settle and live, if they could, where they feel comfortable, where they can afford it, and where they want to. And that's irregardless of color. But regrettably, in the United States, as in Baltimore, that's not been allowed. So I think in time, the idea of having a land trust houses is not to take over the whole neighborhood. That's not possible. You're looking for a combination where the people who have lived there, want to be there, can remain there, that they can be the stewards of their own choices, that they can own property and learn how to hold on to a piece of property that they have purchased, and they can begin to build wealth and take that forward to the generations. So there's a lot going on, and there isn't one answer, and there isn't one solution. South Baltimore Land Trust is just trying to be there for as many people as they can in the best way we can think of and afford.
Thank you, Sharon. And I think Serafina was next, and then Father.
Sorry, yeah. Just a couple of thoughts. One is I was looking at the proposal and thinking to myself, is there a way that if we're supporting this effort, we can connect with the community, in some other ways? And I don't mean going and saying, oh, let us help you, clean up at all, but rather to engage in dialogue and for our own learning and understanding the experience that they're going through in this effort and in this process. So that was just one thought, because I know so many people feel, well, we really want to be more hands-on, more involved. And I'm not one for going and helping, sweep the streets. But I do think that there might be a way, Sharon, I don't know what you think about this, but if you talk about partnership, it's not just about the funding, but it might be a way for us to learn as they're going along and experiencing their, their obstacles, their roadblocks, their challenges, what's working. So that was just one thought. And
Jerry, we're going to talk about that a little bit later.
Oh, good. Okay, good. Oh, and the other thought was there are other land trusts that are a bit older and have been really successful. And if this community is interested in understanding more about it, there are people on CCHD, for example, and who've been very active in the city on this. Denise Jones Dorsey, Skip, you know her, who would, I think loves our parish and would be happy to meet and talk with us.
Thanks, Jerry.
Okay.
Father?
Yeah, this is really a question for you, Sharon. What's the level of home ownership in Cherry Hill?
Low.
Okay, that answers my question, because I mean, if the majority of folks own their own homes, there is actually some advantage to them with an increase of value of their own property. But if the majority are not owned, then it's a setup, unfortunately, for gentrification. So people lose where they've lived for generations and oftentimes don't have access to decent housing beyond that.
It isn't above, I believe it's in the 30s, somewhere between 30 and 35.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you, Sharon.
So glad you're on this call, Sharon. Skip?
I had a question for Sharon too. Sharon, wasn't there a large amount of public housing in Cherry Hill as well?
Cherry Hill had, and I'm not as good at this as some others who are in our circle. Cherry Hill had a huge allotment of public housing.
Mm-hmm.
And still does have, I believe, more existing public housing in the city than in that area than any place else remaining in Baltimore City.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of the culture too, and that's part of the initiative. There's more than one initiative in the Cherry Hill, Curtis Bay area, and they're attempting to figure out how they repurpose, how they everything. But you're right, there was a lot of public housing there, and there still is.
Mm-hmm.
I think Dr. Brown might have mentioned that when it was either that or when in one of our sessions that we talked about the designated housing projects, and that some of them were designated for white people and some were designated for Black people. And I believe that was one of them. Any other questions before we move on? Okay. Skip, would you like to cover our next steps?
Sure. Thank you, Peggy. I guess first I want to say that when we began the whole deliberation process, we asked for the Holy Spirit's guidance, and I think she gave us just that as we move through our decision making. Really, the We Have a Dream team has done an excellent job deliberating whom to assist. The selection of a community-focused initiative like the South Baltimore Community Land Trust and an education initiative in St. Francis Academy are outstanding choices. The community initiative fulfills the guidelines expressed early on when we read Dr. Brown and the Black Butterfly. The Education Initiative assists the first and oldest continually operating Black Catholic educational facility in the United States. And it's one that's been educating Black students 38 years before Baltimore City Public Schools did, including educating slaves when that was illegal to do. So there's a tremendous heritage there. Because St. Francis Academy was founded by Mother Mary Lang, its selection also supports the team's wish at one point to assist in the canonization of African Americans who deserve that recognition. So for St. Francis Academy, we already know that there's a specific initiative, the Kirk-Gaddy Fund, which will support the retention of talented teachers in the school and will begin in January. John and Audrey Rogers and Ray and Pat Barr will lead this initiative and handle it independent of this group. So now we need to make sure that our assistance to the South Baltimore Community Land Trust comes in the ways most useful and hassle-free to that organization. And we need to ensure that our system for accepting donations, growing them, monitoring them, distributing them are sensible and accurate. We propose a separate checking account with a line item at St. Vincent's, just as we have for emergency services and the resource exchange. We would designate donations made out to St. Vincent's for We Have a Dream. Our positive connection, and this goes back to what you were bringing up, Serafina, earlier, our positive connection with the South Baltimore Community Land Trust, with Sharon on their board, needs to be built from the ground up. This does mean initial conversations with the leadership to learn what they want to do first and how we can best interface with them to accomplish that. But I thought it was really wonderful to note in their application that the application expressly also welcomed any technical and consultative expertise some of us may have. So they do want us to work with them, not over them, but with them. And we can also begin that conversation. How can we help in that way? How can our thinking assist their thinking? So this initiative will need a team to determine how to promote, advertise, and solicit resources for our Racial Equity Fund. We will need to determine timeframes for our efforts and specific plans for the various ways we will assist them beyond financial contributions. So we believe, to be honest with you, that our group here is too large to hash out what is needed. So when Peggy and Jody and I were thinking, we came up with the idea of really, and I think it was yours that started it off, Jody, to have a brainstorming session on Zoom on January the 5th, 2 weeks prior to our normal We Have a Dream meeting. We would really appreciate your helpful ideas, and we'll send out a Zoom on the 3rd, day after my birthday, asking you to join us for brainstorming. And if you have ideas but won't be able to join us on the 5th, please send an email to Peggy or me with your ideas. And also, if you know people who have that kind of expertise, even if they're not in our group, mention them so that we can begin to think about them, interact with them, and communicate with them. So those are some of the thoughts that we've been having, and we'd like your reaction to them.
It might be helpful, Skip, to review that paragraph about what we need to figure out.
Okay. So I guess we're on two kinds of levels. One is internally figuring out how we set up our fund and go about growing it and building it and so forth. And then marketing the growth of the fund. The other one is really beginning under Sharon's assistance, some real communication and interface with South Baltimore Community Land Trust. And just really having what I think are some exciting conversations. What is their prioritization of tasks? And then how will what we're trying to do fit into that? How does that affect our timeline? So that we're really helping them in the best way we can, because we're not going to, honestly just jump off and here's a pot of money. I mean, it will be something that we will be growing. So we want them to have a realistic idea of, we're just getting up and getting going, and how do we help them and not hold them back. But, it won't be immediately before there's a big input from us. The other part of it is, at the same time, under their invitation and under their leadership, really holding with them discussions such as Jerry was interested in, where we're thinking together, problem solving together, and maybe with the expertise of some of the people, because there's some tremendous talents within St. Vincent's Parish, people who've been involved in community building, whose spouses were involved in, those people could be very, very helpful in talking to a group that's, really going head on trying to do this. And especially when you're looking at it happening with making an impact on what has been true systemic racism involved in what happened.
Thanks, Skip. Father, I see your hand up.
Yeah, a couple of different things. One is, Sharon, is Catholic Charities involved at all with this? Because I know Catholic Charities is heavily involved and really devoted to Cherry Hill.
Catholic Charities has been involved in South Baltimore, less so than in Cherry Hill.
Right.
So, but yeah, there's an involvement, yes.
With the land trust.
Not as much with the land trust as with the Cherry Hill and some initiatives in Cherry Hill.
Okay, because I'm just curious, because if there is that relationship, in terms of going back to what Serafina was saying, it would because if there is that Catholic Charities connection, there would, I would think, be lots of opportunities for active involvement in the local community via some of those programs that Charities is very active in the Cherry Hill area. The second thing I want to say is, I think, Skip, as you talk about this, the process of establishing the fund and then the marketing of it, I think the thing that comes to mind to me is how can this group and these two investments, how can that continue the process of helping the parish to understand issues around racism?
Mm.
So could there be this secondary dimension to all of this, where this committee continually, based on what's happening with St. Francis and with the land trust, is continually educating and giving feedback into our own community?
Father, I think that's a great comment. And actually, it really touches on the topic that we've announced a couple times before that we really need to discuss, because it's part of sort of self-learning. And that really is how, and I guess I tend to put this more towards people who are white than of color, but how do you really talk to other white people to get them to understand the real meaning and depth of systemic and structural racism, and with so much that's already happened that has brought about fear and misunderstanding and misinterpretation. I just think that's a tremendous task. And so I would fold that right into the question you're saying, how does our parish really learn to self-grow, but at the same time, really be able to help other people who've been hobbled by all the misinformation and propaganda of fear.
And hoping to cover, at least initially, kind of our journey and how we're racist and some of the things we're trying to do to change some of the systemic and structural. And in that, we've talked numerous times, just Jody and Skip and I, about are we going to continue like quarterly, which would be a perfect opportunity to give updates, but we will need to find out at the town meeting if the parish is with us or if it's just this working group. So I suspect the parish will be with us, but that is a whole nother piece. But white fragility will be coming up in one of our months here. Does that answer your question, Father, enough?
Yeah, I think as time goes by, I am ever increasingly aware of how powerful compassion is.
Mm.
And so in the midst of all the technical aspects that are out there related to racism, I think ultimately having the opportunity to listen to people tell a bit about what the lived experience is, that's where I think compassion is stirred. And we all know how powerful compassion can be, both in terms of responding to individuals, but oftentimes wanting to do something to change structures.
Yes.
And also listening to other people too, who don't really see themselves as racist, but really believe that one side is asking for a bigger piece of the pie than the others, and that they're being cut out. But there are also people of need, not understanding, the real dimensions and percentages that most of the poor are still white in this country. Most of the people, receiving all the benefits are still white, but you just got this significant number of people who purposefully have been placed in this situation.
Serafina?
Yeah, just a couple of quick things. One is, Sharon, help me with this. I do know that in the application for CCHD funding, this is going to Father Ray's question about Catholic Charities, but I know in the CCHD funding applications, there are questions about relationships with parishes, for example. And so I don't remember, this was all pre-COVID and, when I went and when I did this, but I think there's a relationship with some Catholic parish or parishes there. So that might be an interesting link to make if we could go back and take a look at that. Do you know offhand? Do you remember?
Right now, I'll be honest with you, I do not know. I know that there are relationships that have been hot, warm, cool during COVID and everything else, but you are right. It is something that we need to re-examine and reinvigorate or whatever we need to do on several levels, because once again, as I say, it's not just South Baltimore isn't just housing, it's also for zero waste and recycling and continuing to campaign for better air quality. There's a whole range.
So I'm 99% certain that they responded in the application that there is a relationship with one or two Catholic parishes. So that might be interesting for us to understand what that relationship is.
That's true.
And then the other thing I was just going to say, this last few comments, Skip and Peggy and Ray, about what do we do with the rest of the parish. I think we can't let this go. This group has diminished over time, and I've missed some meetings, but this is not about missing meetings. The group has diminished over time. And so I think whether if it's a town hall or whatever it is, I think we can't let this go as a point of compassion and consciousness raising. where there is resistance to, but in a gentle way of invitation, but where there is resistance to delving into this as a predominantly white community. I just feel we can't let it go. We've got to find opportunities to re-engage people and expand the engagement with our community.
We concur. Chuck?
Many years ago, the Archdiocese had an urban commission, and that was until Cardinal Keeler came and eliminated it like he did other things. The reason I mention it, we were very aware of St. Veronica's being a bulwark in Cherry Hill in those days, and the pastor was, I can't recall his name, but it's very highly regarded. So I would assume that St. Veronica's is some place that could be counted on as being important in Cherry Hill now.
I
Thanks.
think you also find Cherry Hill has one of the largest Head Start programs the Catholic Charities runs, which also would be a great resource.
Good. So we had a couple of other announcements. Know that we also want to support legislation, and I think this group did a great job last year. And there was a lot of legislation, and there will be again this year that we'll want to support, that will work towards that greater racial equity. And Jack Schmidt graciously volunteered to lead that effort again. So thank you so much, Jack. And he also, I guess we want to know if anybody's interested in helping Jack, if you could please either email him or email me, because we know how important legislation is. So please give that your prayerful consideration. And it's a short-term thing, as you all know, because of the legislative process. So anyway, thanks again, Jack. Jerry, I see your hand.
Because we were in a subcommittee, Peggy, Sharon, Skip, and I, and we were writing the letter to the Archbishop, and Bishop Lewandowski. Has that just been put on hold for now, or are we still going to be working on that piece of the racial equity?
Well, I mentioned earlier, if we had time tonight, we could pull that up. I wasn't sure if we would have time for that. But we're at a point now, it's almost 8 o'clock. So were there any other comments about the proposal, Father?
This wasn't a proposal, but I think it fits into what we're talking about. I'd sent you and Skip this article from the Sun paper about the reporting of murders. It may be something for the two of you to send to the entire community, to the committee, and maybe people could write letters to the various news outlets indicating that we're concerned about some of these realities. So everyone else is not going to know what I'm talking about, but I think that might be something worth taking a look at.
All right, thank you. Did you send it? When did you send it?
I sent it this afternoon. It was it was an editorial in the Sun paper regarding how the racial disparity in terms of how murders are reported, and that with African American, you just hear that it's somebody's been murdered, but nothing about the person. But in other environments and other areas of the city, you're going to get all this information about how this was a wonderful person, et cetera. So there was some really interesting comments and perspectives that I think might elicit a desire on the part of some people to be in contact with the news media and ask for some equity in relationship to that.
All right, thank you. And I do remember that vividly from the bias training that Jody did. Remember the picture of the one person was said to be looting, the person of color, And then the white person, what was the phrase they used for that, Jody? Do you remember? One was looting, but it wasn't negative like looting. It was, so I mean, it's so ingrained. I
think it was finding. They found
oh yeah, they found.
Okay.
the food they needed.
Anyway, Audrey, your hand up.
Yes. I would caution that this group needs to figure out one or two things that it really puts its energy behind. Because the last 5 or 6 minutes of this discussion, we have veered off into a whole lot of different arenas. We have in front of us, first of all, St. Francis proposal is going to move independently. And I wanted to, again, thank Skip and Peggy for allowing us to make you all aware of it, and to thank all of the people who contacted me independently to support it. That has a life of its own. I applaud the group for picking the South Baltimore Land Trust. It is critically important to get that kind of generational wealth established. Put our energy in that. And also what was thrown out at the end that Jack is spearheading, and that is the legislative agenda. Two comments on that. The one that keeps me moving in that regard is what Joan Chittister said. She said, you know, in the beginning, we thought all we were obligated to do was to give money to poor people. Then we learned a little bit more and decided and were inspired that we have to sit in solidarity with poor people and have relationships with them and understand what they're going through. She said, but that's not good enough anymore. We have to work to change the structures that keep people poor. And that's where the legislative agenda comes in. Peggy, I have to disagree wholeheartedly with you that we did a good job last year. We asked for support. We asked for support in several different levels. Mary, Jack, and I were stuck at the end doing all the work. We had 1 or 2 people who said they would write letters, and that was it. It was a hell of a lot of work, mostly that Jack did, covering the legislative agenda. But what we did when we decided what bills were important for St. Vincent's to support is that we declared ourselves, the 3 of us, the St. Vincent's Legislative Advocacy Group. And we wrote 105 emails to the delegates and the senators from 5 or 6 districts in the Baltimore metropolitan area, saying that we had parishioners in their district and we were watching what they did and we wanted them to support this. But we're the ones that did 105 emails. And we did it on the basis that it's not how much power and how many people you have behind us. It's how much power and people your audience thinks you have behind us. That was how we operated last year. So this year, Jack and I have talked, and Mary, and there are organizations that are out there whose interests are congruent with ours. There was a lot of major legislative successes last year, particularly, say, around women's detention centers. You know, there are 5 detention centers for men leaving jail that teach them life skills and employment and everything they need to be able to make it. There are none in Maryland. Last year, we passed a bill that said there had to be one for women, but it was unfunded. So we haven't gotten anywhere. So this year, that's the push to fund it. Those kind of things are, I was on a call the other night with Jews for United for Justice and Standing Up for Racial Justice. Those 2 groups are exceptionally organized. They're well-funded, and they make it very easy for you. You know, they give you legislative alerts, and they give you a one-click system to talk to your delegate about support for a bill. And I would encourage us not to try to lay all these eggs in Jack's lap this year to try to do it, de novo ourselves with what resources, little resources we have, but to ally ourselves with those groups. And Jack, I apologize if I've spoken out of hand. But I just feel like we have to translate what we've been talking about for 2 years into effective action. We can't continue to be progressives who talk things to death. Okay, I think I've said enough. I'm sorry. Oh, thank you.
I will say that I think this group did sign letters and support. I can't remember all the specifics, and your memory is way better than mine. But I remember having a list for those who signed letters that we collected for the climate legislation and those who signed letters for the racial justice. And I remember that it was almost even, not the same people, but almost the same number on each. So, I mean, I think there were a lot of people on this Zoom that did step up and sign letters and send them. Now, maybe we're talking about different things, Audrey, but I do remember
We may be
people that supported things. I remember standing up at church saying,
I know climate action was independent of what we were trying to do. We were looking at housing and police accountability and juvenile detention and health. They were the ones we were looking at, and we were late coming to the game, but we didn't have the response that would have been necessary to get anybody's attention. That's why we pretended we were bigger and stronger than we were.
well, I appreciate the pep talk, and anybody who wasn't planning on stepping up, please do. Father. You're muted.
You're muted.
There we go. All right. Quick response to Audrey. I think this is a systemic problem. We talk about writing letters to the Archbishop, to all kinds of people, and people don't. So I think the larger question is, why doesn't that happen? Because I think if we can understand some of the dynamics that are operative, it might give us some sense about things that we might be able to do that might foster people taking a much more active role in terms of contact with city council members, with state legislators and federal legislators. So I think it's important enough to maybe put this on an agenda down the road.
And maybe tie it to the gospel. Not
that would be encouraging.
But just Mary Catherine.
I wanted to know how Audrey would think we hadn't written letters to our legislators. How would you know how many people had written letters or emailed their legislators?
You know, I apologize if to anybody who did that I have inappropriately and incorrectly assaulted verbally here. I did not intend that. I know that we were asked to organize something in the middle of the session, and it was the response to that was lukewarm, and so therefore I generalized to what may have happened all the way around. So I apologize if I offended anyone. I didn't mean to do that, but I do wish us to do something structurally, legally, you know, the things that make people poor. And the land trust, I fully support. That is getting at the heart of it. But legally, there are a lot of things that are going on that are going to prevent things like the land trust being ultimately the success story it could be.
Skip.
First, I just want to say, Audrey, I think speaking your truth is so important. This is the kind of dialogue that engenders moving forward when we have an honest expression of opinion. So please don't apologize for that. I think we've all got to learn to be more comfortable with our perceptions and perspectives and having them meet somewhere. But secondly, I just wanted to support what Father said about really finding ways to learn what really impacts legislatures. I was a state bureaucrat for 34 years at the Maryland State Department of Education. And like so many other groups, we had, our liaison down there, Renee McGurk Spence would be down there from November, actually for a few weeks after the legislature in her office there, pressing our causes and all of that. And I always felt that letters had some impact, but not as much as I would have wanted them to have. People sort of get used to it and how you handle it or respond to it in a way. And I think we really need to discuss some ways that we really could have that kind of impact Father talked about. For instance, maybe calling them into a meeting and where you're face to face and you put them on the carpet. They're off their territory and they're uneasy, and you're talking to them directly face on, or going down there and doing that. Even testimony has been sort of jiggered in a way that you can only do so much. You've got 2 minutes, but if enough of us showed up down there and kind of hogged the testimony and developed it sequentially or whatever, those kinds of physical numbers really impress them too. And maybe those are the kinds of steps we could really begin to take and assist you and Jack in really kind of shaking people up so that they're not used to the same old tactics all the time.
Thanks, Skip. Jody? Oh, can I just say before you start, Jody? Audrey, we weren't chastising you. We appreciated the pep talk. All right, go ahead, Jody.
I'm not exactly sure how to say this, but it seems like over the past year, there were, at least in my mind, there have been 5 sort of major pieces of this, like learning, like Skip was just talking about, supporting a neighborhood, supporting education, working on legislation, which is absolutely the sort of long term, and the relationship piece. And trying to get all 5 of those things in. And Audrey, I know, gosh, we were talking, Peg and Skip and I, how much, we appreciated that you were spearheading the education piece. So I think our idea about brainstorming, we didn't know if in this large group to try to talk about, okay, the specific steps, like, okay, what are we actually going to do, right now? What do we need to present to the town hall, or Skip and Peg or all of you? And so we thought, do we need a brainstorming session of people that are really passionate, that want to work and talk and figure out some of the details? And maybe this whole group wants to do that. I don't know, but that's kind of what we were thinking. The next step is, okay, yeah, we've got all these things that we want. We do have to narrow it. We do have to get some things done. So, what are the concrete steps and what are you going to bring to the parish? So I guess that's kind of where we are, but I'm agreeing with so much. I think Father had a really good point before, and Audrey and Skip, and I'm thinking we're probably all in that same arena. So maybe everyone will come to the brainstorming. That's all.
Thank you, Jody. That would be lovely. Anybody else have any comments?
I got one more. I just wanted to tell Jerry, all the work our little subcommittee, you and Peggy, Sharon and I did, there's no way I'm letting that letter just lie there. So, and we really think it's ready to go. We just need to bring it in front of the group and have you look at it without nitpicking. I think it's ready to go. I really do.
So it's
Thank you.
12 minutes after 8. Skip, I can pull up the letter if you all want
No,
to.
I miss
we don't
it.
have to do it tonight, but I just wanted Jerry to know there's no way I'm letting that thing go after all the
We'll
time.
sign it, we'll sign it ourselves, right, Skip?
I'll take it down to him and put it on his desk.
Thank you, Skip.
And then I just say, I really liked Audrey's idea about aligning ourselves with these other groups that are doing similar things. And she talked about like a link where sometimes you just have a couple clicks and it sets you up calling your legislature, and they're set up with zip codes. I'm on one of those, and it's all these democratic issues. And they told me that I had sent 26,000 letters over time. I bet, they have a script, but you can edit it yourself, but they make it so easy that it ends up like that you can send a whole lot of emails. I don't know how effective they are, but somebody must think that it is. And if they end up getting a lot of them because they're so organized, but I imagine some of these groups have all that set up. If you just, it's so easy to send it when someone sends you a text and you just click and you're there.
The nice thing about Surge Maryland, okay, is that they send them from you to your district delegates. And it's your district delegates are only going to pay attention to the people that put them in office. So that was why we were very specific last year that we had parishioners in your district, even though it might have been one or two of you. But they didn't know that. But anyway, if it's in your district, they will pay attention to you. Otherwise, they really don't care about your opinion. I mean, that sounds crass, but it's the God's truth.
Well, the ones that I've sent have been to my district. It's been all these democratic issues, and then it just added up over time. And I was just like, oh, okay. But I mean, I have daily costs, and it comes every day. So.
Sally, we had a session last year where I shared my screen and we actually showed people how easy it was. We pulled up one of Serge's emails and we showed him how to click on it. We showed him so we did do a session like that. If anybody needs to be reminded how to do that or wasn't on that session, feel free. Sally can give you a tutorial, right, Sally?
Well, it just came to me. I don't even remember. It was a while ago. I don't even remember how I got on that. I was on some list and I went on to another one. I don't really know how it happened. And then I was sending all these.
Yeah, some of them are really easy. So thank you. Serafina?
Yeah, so I think Sally is actually speaking to Skip's point that we need a different way to figure out how to communicate with our legislators. Getting 26,000 letters and they all read exactly the same. Audrey's right. It has to be to the people we elect, but I think we need a different way to communicate. I chatted a little bit with Skip and I said, there's sort of an African saying that too much of that, you become the mosquito on the elephant's ear. It doesn't matter anymore. There has to be another way to get the point across. And maybe, I'm sorry to say this, we like the easy click, but it might be more of the personal letter, the personal communication, the personal phone call. That's asking a lot of people, I know, but honestly, it's what touches the heart. It's not a form letter. That they get from so many people. Or Skip, I like the idea, how do we invite somebody to hear us directly? Maybe not just us, maybe it has to be a larger, connection with other parishes or something. But I just think it's gotten too easy to click.
Yeah, one of the things I learned, Serafina, was they're counting votes. They may not care a piddle about the issue or the morality of the issue. I was trying to raise teacher certification by $5 when I was in charge of certification and made friends with, I think he calls himself X4 or something now on BAL and a couple of others, new senators. And I went down every week, jawboning and befriending. And at the end, I have to at least credit Clarence Mitchell with this. He said, Skip, we're not about to do what you want us to do because a State Department of Ed official, and then there's 35,000 in the teachers union who don't want any raise. And I said, yes, but for God's sake, hairdressers pay $50 every 5 years. We're asking for $10, $5, $5 more. And I said, and what do we do with that? We can technologize the place so we're not cranking rows and rows of folders to come up with people's certification. I went through all that. He says, that's fine, and I appreciate your passion, but my election depends on whom the teachers union votes for. He says, so we'll do something, but it won't be what you want. But I promise we won't just sit there. That was a big lesson for me.
Mhm.
The counting votes.
Yeah, another thing about the representatives, and it depends on your district, but I Zoom with my different representatives. They'll have a meeting in the neighborhood and you can get on their Zooms and they start calling you by name. And so, somebody's waving. So I guess somebody's leaving. Bye.
And I wanted to say, Audrey, maybe that communication of 2 or 3 people that say we represent X number of constituents might be more effective than X number of constituents sending the same exact form letter. It might not be a bad thing. I don't know.
I think Rita was first and then Mary Catherine. But you're muted, Rita.
Mine's pretty simple. I was just going to say, on the form letters that you can send online, most of them you can change it a little bit. And Sylvia Eastman, who has been very active in every kind of supporting all kinds of causes all her life, says that first line, the first word should be what you want to say, because they say it's the form letter and they blah, blah, they don't pay attention to it. But if you add your 2 cents right at the very beginning, it's not a form letter anymore. Because you got what you wanted to say out of it. That's all.
Thank you. Mary Catherine?
Well, I've heard that they do care about how many people are for something or against something. So even though you're sending a form thing, if they count thousands of people that are voting for them for something, that does make a difference to them. They're not going to read every letter that they get, obviously. And somebody else is tallying how many are for or against something. So it can come any which way, email, letter, phone call, whatever way you want to do it, but they just tally it down on a piece of paper. And that's how they know. But I didn't want to criticize Audrey Rogers. I was wanting her not to feel bad that she felt that nobody had done anything, because I don't think you realize how many people may have done it on their own.
Yeah. And we did meet in Annapolis on one visit. One of the representatives said, if they get 10 letters on an issue, that's something. So 10 isn't very many. And I was very impressed with that. I don't remember which one said it, but that's, that should be fairly easy to do. So, anyway, is there anything else that somebody would like to bring up? So I guess I got no, we don't have time to do the acknowledgement letter, so we'll save that for another meeting. So finally, we also need to remember that another important topic, which needs our thoughtful and prayerful discussion as a group, and that is, how do we really communicate with white people the impact and reality of white privilege and systemic inequity, so that they and we really understand it. So stay tuned for that. So our next full meeting is January 19th. And please, you all with ideas and excellent ideas and suggestions tonight, please jump on the brainstorming that we'll probably send out about the 3rd. So that'll be 2 weeks before the normal January 19th meeting. And Jody will offer our final prayer, and Skip and I pray for your safety and your joy during this holy season.
And we thank God for you. It's been one heck of a year and plus.
So Jody,
Dear God, we rest humbly in your care. Sometimes we grow weary that we don't accomplish enough and grow impatient at the pace of change. However, we are grateful for your continued presence in our work and are greatly in need of your Holy Spirit. We are filled with righteous anger for the disparity and injustice of racism. We are filled with discomfort for the ways our lives have been supported by our undeserved privilege. Fill us with compassion and direct each of us as you call us. Inspire us to loving action. Give us wisdom to discern our individual part in this collective path and the stamina and courage to sustain it. Your greatest gift is love. Open our hearts to carry your love even when it is difficult. And we trust that you will lead us where we need to go. Amen. And
amen.
personally, I'd like to pray that everyone has a joyous and blessed Christmas.
Thank you,
Same
Jody.
to you, Jody.
Thanks,
To
Jody.
you and to all.
Thank you all for
Thank you
showing
all.
up.
Okay.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas.
Love you,
Be careful,
family.
be
Merry
safe, be
Christmas.
healthy, be happy.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Y'all.
Happy holidays.
Yes,
Hey.
exactly. And
Yeah.
next
Thank
time
you,
we
Sharon.
meet, it'll be 2022.
Oh, my.
And I'll be a year older.
Yes, you will. Happy pre-birthday.
30 days, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh,
Okay.
2022 is a number I don't even know what to think about.
Let's hope it's a better year, right? All right.
I
Thank
know,
you
yeah, there's just so much. What can you say?
so much.
See you all soon.
All
Bye-bye.
right.
Yeah.
Bye, Joe.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Oh.
Oh, where are we going here?
Yeah, Sharon.
Did you stop recording, Peggy?
I will do that now. Thank you.